Well, after 2000, the research landscape changed. At least it changed in the Netherlands. And in the meantime, I had become director of the Institute for Gender Studies. It was an interdisciplinary institute, and I was running it as an anthropologist, and that's good because anthropologists are used to holism, to bringing together different fields of thinking, whether it's economic, religious, social, medical, philosophy, all these disciplines we had in our institute, and it was a very interesting time, but it also meant that my role changed and that I had less time for sabbaticals, or no time for sabbaticals, to say the least. And also that my function changed in the sense that it was more important to get funding for research for others than for my personal research. And I tried to combine my own interests within these larger projects. But also the funding landscape changed in the Netherlands. We have this Dutch Organization for Scientific Research, and especially within it, WOTRO, and that's a section for research in the tropics. So that's where anthropology is usually applied for. Plus we had the system that if PhDs wanted to do a research and applied for WOTRO, you had to more or less submit it through the professor. So it was the professor who submitted it, and also the qualities of the professor were very important in getting the grant or not. So you were very much involved with the application, much more than I find in other countries where you just find a supervisor and that's it. You have the name of a supervisor, and in the Netherlands that was not the case. And after 2000 also the funding regime changed, because a lot of money used for individual research was taken away and used for programs, and the program topics were decided outside the it was a scholar I mean the group who decided upon the topics, of course, consisted of scholars, but at the same time it was not you as a person who decided what to do research on, but this group decided what would be the next topic for the next year. So would it be identity, would it be migration, would it be diversity, and at one point there was this program, and it was called The Future of the Religious Past. And then Katrien Notemans came to me, and she was an anthropologist in the anthropology department, and said, well, shouldn't we do something about it? She was teaching the anthropology of religion, and I had edited in the context of my Middle East studies 2 Dutch volumes on Islam. One was called Lokale Islam, Local Islam, and the other one was Muslim Islamic pilgrimages. So I had done some work on pilgrimages, because as I said, you're judged on what you have done, so you have to show yet you have already publications in the field that you want to do research in. And so we thought, it would be very interesting to compose a program on pilgrimage. And this programmatic thinking was totally new for me, and I think it is a little bit contrary to the anthropological view of going as a soul by yourself and sit in a village, and you can't imagine 5 anthropologists sitting in the same village. And at the same time, you can't imagine anthropologists having dictated their their topic from the outside rather than from what they observe in the village. And of course you always come with a plan to do research on, but in reality it often changes because you adapt on what you find on the ground. But pilgrimage to us seemed to be a possibility because it fitted the requirements of the future of the religious past. It was something that of an old tradition, and we had the idea that new groups were now reviving it, and as such it was theoretically interesting because it counteracted with the idea of secularization of Europe, that the churches remained empty but still millions of people every year went to Lourdes or other pilgrimage sites. And personally I looked for examples on how you do this for anthropologists, and I found an example in the Harvard adolescence program, and Susan Schaefer-Davis and her partner, they wrote a book on adolescence in Morocco, and I thought that was a good example how anthropologists could do that. You would take researchers and place them with a similar set of questions, but then in different sites, and it enabled us to by taking as a starting point pilgrimage to Marian sites. Marian sites are all over the globe, so we could divide them up over the continents and then find researchers or young researchers who would be specialized in a certain area, and they could pick themselves which site they wanted to do. And so we included young researchers from the start in writing up the proposal and writing up their own section. And so we got funded, but then the problem started because one site was not open because there was a war, and one project was withdrawn because the researcher turned out not to be qualified. And so we had to change and then convince the funding agency that going to Burundi was the same as going to Mexico, or that Mexico suddenly changed into Bolivia. And of course I was a project leader, so I had to do all the talking and all the writing in convincing them that actually it could well be that you did the same research in another country. And finally they were convinced when I just made clear that the research question wasn't going to be changed, and so they accepted that. And so it was a very nice project, and there were some PhD books coming out of that, but also our volume Moved by Mary, the power of pilgrimage. Moved by Mary, yeah. Did you see the book? The Power of Pilgrimage in the Modern World. You forget what you wrote after a while. And the power of pilgrimage in the modern world. And actually, I mean, it's too much to discuss all the findings of the books, but there were some interesting ones. We used a narrative approach in the sense that we wanted to know who was going on the road and what for and what they believed, and in that way we circumvented a little bit the definition of religion, because there were other sociologists in the programs and theologians, and they said, well, what you study is not religion, it's just all these tourists lighting candles on pilgrimage site. And we said, so what, we don't care, as long as we can ask them why they do it and what they do it for. And we also took again power as a central idea, because there had been much written on Mary being used, especially in a gender context, of a type of model of femininity that a lot of women did not appreciate and felt forced into. But at the same time, we also saw that that many people used it to empower themselves and have new uses for religion. And one finding was that there were a lot of new uses for religion. For instance, I went to Kevelaar and found that there the bikers had a special chapel dedicated to Mary, and every year they came together to have their motorbike blessed. And it was a commemorative chapel of all the bikers who had lost their lives on the road. So there was a scroll where you could read all their names. And so there were all kinds of new groups that went on the road and were going to Mary. And an interesting finding was also that I mixed them up a little bit. Wait a minute. That all these icons and like religion or doing the pilgrimage itself was contested. I mean, what the priest was organizing the pilgrimage for was not always what the believers did the pilgrimage for. For instance, Lena Gemse, who participated in the next program, she found a woman crawling on her knees to Mary in Portugal, in Fatima. And when she asked her why she was doing this, she said, well, I want to thank Mary for a successful abortion. So this was not the type of reasoning the accompanying priest would have, but it was something that women themselves wanted to do. And so the pilgrimage itself had different meanings for people, but also the icon. The icon was not a study. We think that, say, the icon in Lourdes is the icon Bernadette saw. Well, it isn't, because there was a lot of negotiation about how the icon should look like or how Mary should look like. And I found this so interesting that I was looking at the lactating Marys, the breastfeeding Marys, because the breastfeeding Marys have gone totally out of fashion. You can't find them anymore. I knew how to find them because if you go to 13th and 14th century churches in Italy, there you find frescoes that are still there, and some of them have been painted over and not survived in history, but they're still there, and some images are still there. But this voluptuous Mary, or the image of Mary as a queen being crowned by her son or by the angels, is something that is not the standard image which is now going on. And over the centuries you see how it has changed from a motherly Mary to a very slim, virgin type, frail, sexless virgin. And this is already a telltale sign of the image of femininity that the church would want to present to women, and also women have to relate to that. And you see that women sometimes select the Mary they like most. And one type of Mary they like most is the Mary around the corner, so near their home, even if you ask them in Lourdes. And we had a set of pictures, so we did a picture photograph elicitation method we used, and we showed them pictures and asked them to tell their feelings about it, so that we knew that what they appreciated most was what they had at home and not the Mary in Lourdes, for instance. And yeah, let me leave it at that. So there were competing discourses on the image and on the meanings of gender. And also competing discourses, there was the Lady of All Nations in in Amsterdam, and one of our researchers was studying that pilgrimage site, and it turned out in the beginning she was very disappointed because no one went there because it was closed. And it was closed because there was a very conservative Catholic group who controlled the premises, and they would not allow strangers, certainly not critical researchers. And but she found out that this group would go to Germany to these huge praying days, and they would denounce, with the image of the lady, homosexuality, abortion clinics, so any new gender ideas that were going around. And at the same time, of course, God thanks internet, she found that an opposite idea evolved in Malta, because in Malta a group of homosexuals had used the same image of Mary in saying, well, she's called the Lady of all nations, so this includes the nations of homosexuals, so this includes us in the church. So they felt left out by the regular church and a regular priest, but in their dedication to Mary and in their motivation to pray, have praying sessions for this, the Lady of all nations, they felt again included in their own religion. In my answers, you already see that another thing that was relevant in our research was the role of gender. The role of gender not only as the icon, as a symbol of femininity, but also in the fact that far more women than men go to these sites. And so we asked them, and we asked the man, why are you here? And then the man often said, I'm here because I have to drive my wife to accompany her. And the women were mostly there to pray for themselves, but also for their family. So women did not come for themselves, but also they came for others. And Katrien Notemans found in Lourdes large groups of African women, because in Africa they were scattered all over Europe, and going to the pilgrimage together was a means for them of meeting each other and reuniting under what they called then Mother Mary, because the women found in Mary not the Virgin, but the mother who suffered like they suffered with their family, with their ill son, or the son who was on the drugs, or the husband who was ill, or the mother who was dying. And women had far more reasons to go there than men. And especially Mary, as a suffering mother, was a far more important role model for them than the Virgin and the purity. And then, strangely enough, another reason why there were more women is that for women it was a very acceptable holiday to go on pilgrimage, because it was safe. You could go there as a 60-year-old and go on a vacation, and what else would you do, if you did not have friends at home to go on a holiday? And they all went together, and it was acceptable to everyone and to themselves. Even my mother, who had never thought about going on a holiday anywhere after my father died, she went on pilgrimage several times, mostly for that reason, because it was a nice outing and it was organized and you did not have to worry about a thing. At the theoretical level, this pilgrimage thing was interesting, because it was a sort of a counter-reaction, as I said, to the notion of secularization in Europe, and the idea, and also how do you define secularization? And usually the main criteria are church attendance or membership of a church. And here we found a lot of people who did religious acts, whether they called it religious or not, which also was interesting, because sometimes when we approached them, they said, I don't think I believe this, I don't believe these visions. And do you think it was real? It really happened? They often asked us. And then they said, and I'm not going to be healed either because I have this illness and I know it's permanent. And then they said, excuse me, because I have to go to Mass or I have to go to the candle procession. So here you see how complex life is, and it's all, there's not just one motivation why people go there, but a complex of reasons why they are there and do the things they want to do. And the interesting thing was also that we found a Dutch Catholic health insurance company who sent 2 planes of pilgrims each year to Lourdes. And they felt a little bit embarrassed about it when they discovered that. And in a way, maybe it wasn't what insurance money is meant for, but at the same time, I think they did well, because it turned out that when we approached the pilgrims going with them, they were very happy with it, not because they were healed or not because they recovered, but because they had devised a system where the patients, because most of them were patients and chronically ill patients, were pushed in their wheelchair or in their bed every day by a different volunteer. So every day they could tell their whole story of illness and problems to a different volunteer. And it was like a psychotherapy for them. You know, the whole week they could tell their stories, while at home maybe no one wanted to listen anymore of this illness that they've had for 20 years. So they all felt very much better after coming back, and also health-wise. So it might even have saved the insurance company some money for these chronically ill people, and if not, at least they had a nice holiday. So we finished this, we did the book, we had our other books, our monographs, and then the European, in the European context, the different funding agencies of the different countries decided to put money together again for a programmatic research project. And so you could submit programs in the same way as for the Dutch organization. And somehow, maybe there was a Dutchman or a Dutch woman in the committee, but they also decided to do it about religion. And they called it the re-emergence of religion as a social force. And we had just finished our program, so we really thought, yes, now we're all prepared. We have our publications to show for. We can easily change it around because we have new issues here. It had to be about Europe. It had to be an international project, so it was easy to find international partners from Ireland and Sweden working on pilgrimage. So we just called them, and sometimes we did not even know them personally, but we said, well, you've done work on pilgrimage, would you like to join us? And they did. And because like it goes with these international projects, it takes so much time to think them up and to organize them that, you know, by the time the call gets out, you have to react nearly immediately. So you only get a few months to put in the proposal. So there was very little competition in the beginning. We thought, I mean, very little, but compared to the normal 10% we're used to. And so there was relatively little competition, and we could connect it with all kinds of European issues, and especially European identity, because European identity is not something Europe is not thought up by the Europeans, but by some politicians and economists, that it would be a good idea to join these countries together for economic and political reasons. And then you don't have a unity yet, so you still have to imagine the community. And for that, religion is an easy starting point, especially because some of the initiators were Catholic. And you see that already. in the flag, for instance, don't say it officially because they deny it, but the flag is, of course, a very Marian flag. It has the Marian color. It has the 13 stars of her crown. It's not the 13 stars of the countries of Europe like the stars in the American flag, but it's the 13 stars of Mary. And we find Marys of Europe all over the place. Like if you go to Strasbourg, there's a beautiful glass pane window of England, of the Mother of Europe, and it's Mary with her crown of 13 stars. And so there were all kinds of relations to this Christian heritage, and what better than the old Christian roots, the old Christian pilgrimage routes that could connect Europe. And not only for this function of identity, but at the same time we found at the sites we studied also a resistance against Europe, because in Brittany, the Britons did not want to be part of France, let alone Europe. So they had their own pilgrimages, their local regional pilgrimages, as a form of resistance against Europe. So we did this second book on gender, nation. What is it called? Gender, nation, and religious diversity. Oh, yeah, gender, nation, and religion in European pilgrimage. Because also in this European context, like look at Poland, gender is an issue that they disagree on. They disagree on some European laws on gay marriage, abortion, and so also these pilgrimage sites functions at crossroads where these issues came to the fore, whether it was in the ideas of the pilgrims, whether it was in the sermons that the preachers held, and the same went for religion, because what interested us in religion was also the opposition between Christianity and Islam. What interested us in religion was the opposition between Christianity and Islam, that Christianity was being used as an identity marker in Europe. And of course you see it all over the place nowadays in the opposition against Muslim migrants or refugees coming in. And it's also interesting to see it sometimes. So we were also interested in joint pilgrimages where Muslims and Christians go together to, and especially Marian sites, but also to other sites that were discussed here. And maybe we should stop here.